Everybody, Jen here with Teacup Tiny Homes, and I'm so blurry. Let's see if we can get focused here. There we go. Exciting day. We're having some great Christmas festivities behind me here, so I thought this would be the perfect background. As you guys jump on, I want to introduce to you today who we're going to be talking to, because we have a really great one-on-one interview with some beautiful people from California that live in a tiny home. So we're going to talk to Bela and Spencer, and they're living as a family of 3 in a very highly publicized tiny home. So we're just going to wait for them to join here, and until then, I suppose I could put some like Christmas music on in the background or something. Just kidding. I won't do that. But you did have an opportunity before, and I know some of you, hopefully you can join today as well, that asked some really great questions. Oh, hi, there they are. And there should be a button there that you can hit that says join. Did you see that? It was a red one that popped up. Or join conversation or something right when you first joined. Okay, so maybe if you want to go back and then like stop watching and then join it again, and then it should pop up just right beside you there. I know, these things. There we go. Got it. Just waiting. Isn't technology amazing? We can talk to people all around the world through Instagram, and you guys can watch.
Hi.
Hi.
This is our first time doing live. Sorry for the technical difficulties.
No, that's awesome. Now you're going to know for later, next time.
Yeah.
How are you
so much
doing?
for inviting us.
Yes, thank you for joining. As I was doing all my research on you guys, I absolutely love your blogs and absolutely love everything that you're doing. And it's so interesting because you guys do something a little bit differently. Your arm's going to get sore, right?
Yeah, I know. I should have set up a tripod.
Shoot. So we'll try and keep it to 30 minutes. Let's see how your shoulder strength is. Okay. So you guys are doing something a little bit differently too, because you also rent out your tiny home as an Airbnb, right? So why don't you tell us a little bit about your story, introduce yourselves, and kind of what you got going on?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Bella. This is Spencer.
Hello.
We've been married almost 8 years, and we've been living in a tiny house for almost 2 years now. Spencer is a stay-at-home dad. He's been staying at home ever since Escher's been born, and she's 2.5. And I work as the managing editor of the American Journal of Bioethics. So a lot of my work is remote, so I do a lot of work kind of as we travel. Yeah. And as far as our tiny house goes, we knew going into it that we loved to travel, and also we loved Airbnb. We loved the concept of sharing our home with others. So going into it, we kind of designed our home thinking that we would use it.
Yeah, I think a lot of things went into us moving into a tiny house. But I mean, I think the biggest thing is that we were just people looking for housing like anybody else. So we were in the Bay, and it was crazy expensive. We were spending like $30,000 a year on rent or something like that. And we're just like, there has to be a better way. Like, what if we just took that money and tried to like reapply it in some way? And that's what led us to tiny houses. And then after looking at tiny houses, we thought that the movement in general had kind of plateaued a little bit. We wanted to see what new directions it could go and how we could kind of take it to the next level. And that's where we tried to design this house as a sort of tiny house that doesn't have any compromises at all. Like, I mean, it's only 300 square feet, obviously, right? But like from like room to room, if you were to list the amenities, right, it would just sound like a regular house, and the experience of it is actually much better than living in a regular house, you know?
Yeah.
So that was the kind of idea.
That's so cool. And I love that. And I did read that in one of your blogs as well. And I love how you put it, because so often now there are people that comment and they're like, why'd you go, tiny home's only supposed to cost $15,000 or something. But I love how you put it it's about the quality. You have less, but you have higher quality because you can afford that. So
right. I mean, it's an investment like any other investment, and then there are reasons to go smaller on that, and there are reasons to go bigger, and it all depends on kind of what your goals are. And so like we went bigger.
People go tiny for different reasons.
Right.
And we honestly just wanted the best home that we could build for the money. But we're young and we don't really have that much money. So the best home that we could build really was a tiny house.
That's so cool. So how much time do you guys spend in like living in your tiny home versus Airbnb-ing it?
Yeah.
Well,
So
we're like
far we've
scaling
only
up
rented-
Airbnb.
Yes.
We rented it for a 4-month
4
block,
months.
and then we kind of do like little tests here and there as well through the weekends and holidays and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We're getting ready to do a
To
much
a big
longer
long
block,
one.
maybe upwards of 6 months now.
Yeah.
But because the ultimate goal, right, is to kind of take this living expense that we have of our house and kind of just slowly turn it into a passive income stream. And then like just get another tiny house and start setting that up with our new living expenses. So kind of just always have our living expenses kind of working for us. That's the kind of general idea. And so we've done 4 months, and that was, I mean, it was really, really successful.
Yeah.
So now we're going to 6 to 8 months or something like that, maybe have a block.
We just have a flight booked there. We're not quite sure when we'll come back.
Right,
yet,
right.
so.
We're going on one-way flights now, so that's kind of exciting. But,
And nerve-wracking.
yeah.
On a Western train for any of you country people out there. And actually, one of the questions that one of our viewers just asked, and I was thinking the exact same thing, is where do you go when you're not in your tiny home?
So far, it's honestly been really easy. We just go home to
we visit
our family.
Family. We have a lot of family all over the place. We kind of go and visit around, and then we take like intermittent trips in between there, little small trips. This time we're going to go to visit family for the holidays and then go to Spain for a little while. And that's where we have a one-way. So we'll have a one-way trip to Spain, and we'll come back kind of whenever we're feeling like it. Kind of based on how it's going, yeah. And we'll rent places, or we'll stay, and we visit family out there and stuff like that. So
that's awesome. There's like a foot of snow outside here right now, so I'm like super jealous.
Yeah, there's not a foot of snow out here, I'll say.
Guys, you're probably sweating.
It's been a lot of rain, but it's beautiful. It's really beautiful today, for sure.
Oh, we picked a great day then. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the biggest obstacles you encountered. So you decided you're going to go tiny, and what were some obstacles?
I mean, I think there are so many because the business infrastructure is set up such that you can't do basic things that are so easy to do when you have a normal home. Like you can't get a mortgage.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
you have to take out personal loans if you can't pay
I think
for
financing stands out.
land.
Financing stands out as probably the hardest difficulty for most people.
Yeah.
Because,
and you can also, you can
go
also
ahead.
feel so sick when you're doing it because it feels kind of wrong in a way. Because it's so different from what other people are doing. Like taking out a personal loan.
Well, it's always hard hitting roadblocks for sure.
Yeah.
And that's discouraging. But yeah, I mean, I think securing the financing is really typically a very difficult thing. Sometimes you can get RV loans to pay for tiny houses right now. But that's really limited, especially if you wanted, say, a custom house or you're trying to do something new. You really can't get RV loans for those sorts of houses. You can only get the more prefab style tiny houses for RV loans. So Lightstream is a good option. You can go up to like $100,000 with Lightstream. But if you need more than $100,000, then it can get very difficult. And getting the $100,000 Lightstream loans is not super easy either.
Yeah.
So I think like that's the biggest thing, that you can't get a secured loan on a tiny house is very difficult. So that's where I think the biggest risks lie. Yeah, and then finding land for us was actually really very, very easy, but you kind of have no idea how easy it's going to be. You kind of just have to cast lines and see what comes back, and there's no guarantees.
The good thing about finding land is you only have to do it once.
Well, that's not always true.
We had to
either.
do it twice, actually.
No. Well, I mean, some people they get land and then they have to move their house because of zoning. I mean, zoning, the reason why finding land is so hard is because zoning is impossible. And the reality is that if you're going to live in a tiny house and you're going to do it full time, you're really not going to be doing it legally. That's really just kind of how it is. There's very few places where you can actually do that. So,
Yeah, we actually have one of our viewers too, Savannah. She does live legally in a
Cool.
tiny home in Canada, in the
Right.
foothills here. So she is actually watching, and she asked, "What's the permits like there? What are the permits like there?" So, like, what
Yeah.
about your guys' situation? How did you kind of get around kind of those things?
Well,
Oh,
working
hi.
it, yeah. Working it as a rental actually is a little bit easier because we kind of you like
We
it's
technically
easy. It's
don't
easier to
live
not live in it full time.
so
When you're just renting, it's a little
yeah.
bit easier. When you're doing it as a short-term rental or something, it's a little bit easier. So, but yeah, I know. I mean, you walk a gray area, and personally, I don't know anybody apart from the person you just listed. I literally know nobody who lives in a tiny home and doesn't kind of just take that, little bit of gray area along with it.
Yeah.
I suppose there are some
Right.
communities and stuff like that. That's a new up and coming option. You can apply to your local county for like
Yeah.
special permitting and stuff like that. That is an option if you can think ahead enough. And yes, sometimes that does come through, I think, for some people, but it's a
counties are
struggle.
getting it
And of course, some
approved.
places it is legal. Felton
Yeah.
in California.
There was one more that was recently approved like last week.
I don't know, I'm not familiar, but
But the other thing to remember is even though maybe you're not living in it legally, you're also in most places not living in it illegally. So you're not doing anything wrong. Like you're not going to go to
you're not gonna
jail.
go to jail.
The worst thing that could happen is you're going to have to move your house. And I think that's been like thinking about the worst case scenario has been one of our strategies going into the tiny
Yeah,
house.
I mean, I think it's always best when you're taking these sorts of risks to like secure like what would happen, how bad could it get, first, like make sure that that's acceptable. You know what I mean? So, when we were coming in, it's definitely a reality that you might have to move your house, and how can you mitigate that risk? So it's like the biggest way, right, is just let your neighbors know of what's going on, and like because that's really where of anybody that I know who's had to move, by far that's the most common thing is where a neighbor complaining, and because then the sheriff has to come, and then the sheriff's like, yeah, it's not a legal dwelling, you have to move it. And then outside of that is like city inspections. So sometimes you have to be careful, like if you're going to say, it sounds really nice to find like ranch land or something like that, because they have tons of space, but those sorts of places actually tend to get inspected a lot more. And if the city inspector sees something like that, they might tell you that you have to leave. So I think the sort of like,
too much detail.
and maybe I am. I don't know. Am I giving too much detail?
No, good.
Yeah.
It's great. I mean, it's very similar to what we have here, and well, it is pretty much the same, and that is kind of the choices that you either choose to kind of do it where you're hiding in the hills, basically, or you can try and work with the municipality. So the way that we've actually found a lot of success, and personally with clients that I've worked with. We have another one in BC that is installed in an actual town on a temporary permit. So technically, they're right there, and like I say, on that temporary permit, and that is something that we have found beneficial. There have been a few more smaller villages too, where if you work with the municipality, then they're basically like, well, we'd rather have someone on this lot, especially if no one new has moved into the town in like 50 years. They're like, sure, so we can get the tax money. So
yeah, I think going direct to the municipalities is a really good way to do it for sure. If you kind of like if you know where you want to be, why not go and ask them? You never know. So
yeah, exactly. Oh, that's great. And I mean, it's good to know because we in Canada always think like that you guys are so much further ahead of the curve kind of thing. I know it's been bigger. I know. And we're just kind of dealing with the same things, which is awesome. But at the same time, as we see it growing on both sides of the border, then hopefully it'll help each other out, right?
Yeah, hopefully.
Sure.
Yeah. So, everyone wants to know what it's like living in a tiny home with a baby and a toddler.
Yeah. Sure.
How would you describe?
I feel like part of living in a tiny house, especially with a baby and a toddler, so much of it is living outside of the tiny house. You definitely spend time and you sleep there and you eat in your home, but we're really lucky to live in California and spend so much time outside. So we're on a big property. We've got like a mountain and a ridge you can walk to. We've got a big deck set up and a tent in the back. And, you know, we always go, we're close to Santa Cruz, we're close to Redwoods National Park, which is really beautiful. So we spend a lot of time outside the home. But in general, I've been shocked by how actually not a big deal it is. It is just like living with, having a toddler is kind of crazy. Having a kid is kind of crazy. It's a lot of work. So whether you're in an apartment or a starter home or a huge home or a tiny house, I think it's going to be a challenge no matter what.
Well, yeah, I mean, and the bit that I would add is that, I mean, I think we really often reflect on how wonderful it would be to live in our house without our toddler. You know what I mean? I mean, like, it would be great, right? I mean, not like, you know, like, what I mean is, like, you know, we don't have any family around, right? So, I mean, like, she's always around the house. And so what I mean is, like, whenever I'm talking to, like, a couple, just two people, and they're thinking about moving in a tiny house, and they're, like, wondering whether it's going to be an issue or something, it's like, oh my, it's going to be amazing. Like, it's not even a big deal at all. Because, like, we do it with a toddler, and it's still really, really nice. I mean, I think, like, we designed our house differently than a lot of people. So she really does have her own room, which helps a lot. So she can go to bed, you know what I mean? She can go to bed pretty early. And then we have the house pretty much to ourselves, and that's fine. And we put on, like, you know, white noise is an amazing thing. So that really helps. And so you just kind of create those little sound insulation barriers and give everybody your own space is important. At the same time, I mean, I know other people who go the total other direction, and they have, like, family beds, and they do that. And I mean, I think you kind of got to feel it out.
What's right for your family, what works for you.
Yeah, what's right for you. But you know, I think that there are huge benefits to doing it, really. I mean,
the intimacy that you get.
Right. You live very close. You have I mean, she's a very, very social kid. It's hard for me to believe that some of that isn't because of living in a tiny house and just spending so much time around us. Like, she's
got such an amazing imagination, and she plays make-believe, and it's just the most beautiful thing. We get to lay in our bed and we hear her wake up in the morning, and she'll, like, wake up singing, and
every day she'll be singing.
It's so sweet. A little bit annoying, but it's really sweet. And we would not hear that in a normal home. So there are definitely challenges. There are challenges to having a kid, period. But there are a lot of perks too.
Yeah, and I think you just do what works for you. We have a 3.5-year-old and a 1-year-old, and they share a bedroom, and our walls are, like, together. So our 1-year-old, she wakes up scratching the wall in between. It's like the craziest thing at 5:30 in the morning. She's like, I'm like, I'm trying to get in. It's so funny, but I totally get it. You just kind of laugh, and again, it makes such a great story, right? Oh, you guys are frozen a little bit. So we'll see if it reloads here. Hopefully you can still see me. Oh, there we go. There we go. So anyway, okay, so let's see. I have, like, questions taped to the bottom of the tripod so that I can read them.
Nice.
So let's see. What is like a takeaway or something that you've gotten from tiny living that you never in your wildest dreams expected that would happen? Like something positive, how you've changed kind of for the better.
I mean, I think just on the spot, there's a real liberty that's come with having less stuff. It's a real freedom. Like, we can pack up literally everything we own in less than an hour, which is crazy.
Yeah, and that process has gotten easier and easier and easier. I mean, we do definitely still have a little.
Oh, you guys are cutting out a little bit again. We'll see if it comes back. I have the spinning wheel. Oh.
Less stuff. And I think it helps you really hone in on what's most important, so you're not distracted by your stuff. And I don't know, it just kind of makes life easier somehow in that way. What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree. And then just the sense that it has gotten easier and easier to distance ourselves from our stuff. The longer that we live in a tiny house, the less important that stuff has become. And that's probably something that we weren't thinking about beforehand. I think that we did I just think we put a lot of thought into it beforehand. I think a lot of the experience of living in a tiny house has been like what we expected it to be, and has cashed out very well in the ways that we thought it would.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe relationship to stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
That's super cool. Yeah, and for me, it's the way I see it would be like you kind of think it's going to go one way, and then when you're actually living it, you're like, whoa, this is so much cooler than what we thought.
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay, well, I have no idea what time it is, but a few questions from the audience, let's say, some of the
Sure.
ones that were posted. Do you plan on having more kids?
I wouldn't say we plan on it.
We don't necessarily
but we
plan
like the
on
idea.
it. We would like to, I think, eventually.
I wish I could just
I
like
wish
have
I
another
could skip
2-year-old.
the pregnancy and afterwards part. Yeah, and just get a 2-year-old.
Yeah,
That
I
would
like
be
2-year-olds
awesome.
a lot. Infants are.
Oh, shoot. We must have a little bit of a bad connection. I don't know if I'm cutting out for you guys. Maybe I am. Or maybe it's still recording.
Oh,
I think we're back.
yeah, we're back.
Sorry, it
Sorry.
keeps freezing.
That's okay. Hey, whatever. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. Another question. Do you use the garage door often? Do you love it? What about on a cold and rainy day?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, luckily it doesn't get too cold out here.
Mm-hmm.
I think we love what it brings into the house. I mean, it's amazing to be able to just kick it up and you get to go outside, show our garage door. Can you show it on the video? And then we open it up and show the porch. Yeah, there you go.
Dang. There's a bit of a construction site out here. We're getting ready for rentals, but
yeah. So it's so cool to just be able to throw it up and go out into this large deck and like do yoga or eat dinner.
Yeah, and I mean, related to the rainy days and stuff like that, I mean, the alternative, right, is that it's just a regular door or a wall. So then you're in the exact same situation. So it's kind of like when it's beautiful, you use it. And when it's not beautiful, it's closed. And when it's closed, it's fine. You know
and
what
it brings
I mean?
in light.
I mean, I suppose like, it's,
does
you know,
draw,
when it is raining, it's harder to get out of it, right? I mean, like, so if you were experiencing like a lot of rain and cold, I mean, it's not going to be as useful. It's definitely best for the sort of climate where you can, you know, have it open a lot, because we do have it open a lot. I mean, eight months out of the year, easy. It's opened, you know, I mean, a lot of the time. Yeah, a lot of the time. Yeah. So, and it's also great for like having parties and that sort of thing, because then you can just throw it open, leave it open. It makes it so much easier for people to come in and out of the house, and which, you know, it's just so nice. It creates a really cool environment for that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Definitely looks cool. We get asked quite a bit in Canada. Can I have a garage door? And for us, one of the questions is and is insulation an issue with the garage door?
Yeah. If you were in a super cold climate, you wouldn't want to do that. There are other options. You could do like these sorts of accordion style doors, little Z-folds and stuff. Those have better insulation for sure. And I mean, and this kind of comes back to our ideas with tiny houses, is like, they're more expensive. Those sorts of doors are more expensive, but like, it's your house and you're going to buy it and you're going to live in it. And it's just like, you're going to spend so many days in this thing, and it's an asset. It's kind of durable too. It doesn't lose a whole lot of value if you take care of it. So like, just get the things you want for it. It makes a difference. You live in it all the time, you know. So if you need to upgrade the garage door in order to get it, you know, what is it? You know, $1,000, $2,000 extra for the door, but it's a really big feature that really does make a lot of difference in the home and the layout, and what you can do with it from a landscaping perspective makes a big difference if you have something like a garage door, for sure.
If you've got the climate for it, of course. Yeah.
Really cool. Yeah, I love it. And obviously your home has been documented so much. It's all over the internet, I feel like. So
it's been fun to share it.
That's cool.
Yeah. It's pretty beautiful, that's for sure. Another question. How long did it take you to decide on a builder?
Oh, that was one of the hardest parts. So we were doing it. We basically decided we wanted to do it when we were on maternity leave. We were spending a month in Mexico, and this was 2 years ago, almost. Two and a half. And we couldn't really find. We were finding a lot of like DIY tiny homes. There weren't a lot of builders around.
Well, we didn't know.
Time, and that wasn't really our
going into it. We didn't know if we were going to build it ourselves or get a builder. And I think the design process, like what we wanted out of our house, was so expansive that the design process was really just a little bit overwhelming. We didn't want to get too distracted by having to do everything ourselves. We wanted to make sure
We
that we
weren't
had
really
the freedom.
qualified either.
Well,
We
that's
felt-
what I'm saying. We wanted to make sure that we had the freedom to go full on design and not have to worry too much about
the building
actual
itself.
building.
Exactly.
But then it was very difficult to find somebody who, at that time, a lot of the tiny houses were still pretty close to, pretty sort of townhouse design. There wasn't anything that was taking it to another level of
not at the time. Now there are a lot of really
livability.
awesome builders.
Who we I still think David is the best.
Yeah.
But
When we saw the Alpha House, it just blew our minds. Like, I still remember the moment of Spencer finding it and sharing it with me and being like, this is our builder.
Yeah, so I reached out to him immediately and told him that he had to build our house. This is just what has to happen. It was, yeah.
So what was the deciding factor, would you say? Was it the design style that really, that you gravitated to, or?
I think the design style, to me, it felt like the first tiny house that didn't really have the downsides of going tiny. Like, it didn't feel just like a studio, which I really did not.
Well, I think like David's sort of, the innovating feature that drew us was the garage door leading into the great room, the big open expansive room, which nobody else really ever has. And really, even still, you never really find tiny houses that have that. And then that feeding into the kitchen. So you have this central sort of entertaining space, because having the ability to have a very wide open party or a full dinner or these sorts of things was a very important thing going into it. That was a space where I felt like a lot of tiny houses, they have very small tables. It's really difficult to host a size of any table. Any table. Yeah. And this was a way to get around that. And it really brought a new design. His original house, the Apple, was not going to work for us. It was too small.
It wasn't really
it wasn't a family home. Yeah. So that's why we reached out to him immediately and we said, we want to take your current model. We want to move it up to the next level, make it a lot bigger, make it a lot cooler. This is, let's create a new design together. So
make it for you. And that's what I believe too, is that you really have to, like, when you're going from whatever, 2,000 square feet maybe, or 1,600 square feet, and you're going into 300 square feet, everyone lives a little bit differently. So you really have to look at that design and make sure that you can incorporate these little things that are going to work the best for you. Right? Everyone lives different. So you can't just cut.
I think that's one of the most important things for people really thinking about getting a tiny house, is to think about their daily life and, like, what do they do? Where do they spend time with? What's important to them? How do they live their day? And being able to customize it is super cool.
Yeah, awesome. Well, let's see. I know there were a few more. One other one. Do you ever feel closed in?
I mean, sometimes. We have a tent, so that helps, and the weather's nice, so that also helps. But in general, I don't think it's like a consistent problem. It can happen when we're working on things.
I think the only pinch point really related to that would be that because I take care of Escher full time.
Yeah.
If I'm looking to not be around her for a moment, you know what I mean, and have a little time to myself, that is difficult. It's like generally it's like, okay, you can like go to the tent or you can leave the house. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so that's a little bit restrictive. There's like obviously some amount of work. So you can go to the bedroom, you can go to the bathroom, whatever, but so it's like that's like the big well, I mean, like take a shower or something like that. But like that would be a pinch point. But I think like related to Bela and I would say no, that really doesn't ever happen. But that would be like related to having a toddler in the house. Maybe you get some.
Yeah, especially for him. I mean, like, if you're taking care of a kid full time, having that physical and mental separation, like complete break, is so important.
I hear you. I don't know. My hubby goes into the bathroom. He locks the door when he goes to the bathroom. Right. For me, it's like, Mom, opening the door, trying to get in. Like, so I get it. It's hard to find separation. Well, that is so awesome. Now, one last question, unless there's anything else you guys want to add, is one thing you would change about your tiny home if you did it again. One thing that you're just like, dang.
I mean, I feel like, honestly, we have too much storage. I'm not sure that's the one thing, but we have too much storage.
Well, I think that the nesting set in general could have been done in a much more functional way.
So the nesting set is basically underneath our kitchen. It's a level up and the great room is a level down, and you can pull out the steps and it pulls out these 2 tables and benches, but really it's kind of a pain in the butt to set it up very often. So I think we would do that differently if we could make it more
I think that could
somehow.
I think that could be
Add a fireplace.
redone, changed around. But honestly, there are so many things. There are so many things that we would change.
Yeah,
No
we're
bad
hoping to
things,
build
no bad
another
things.
house.
It's more just that there are, regardless of how hard you try, there are always going to be so many ways that you can, once you've lived in it, make it even better. It's not a bad thing. We love our house. We love our house, but you have to see a bunch of things.
Yeah. I always say you almost have to build the same house twice. So that you
absolutely.
Yeah.
You got to prototype and iterate, man. Yeah.
Yeah. And one last question. Words of advice for those watching that want to go tiny.
I mean, I would say if you really want to do it, stick to it. It can feel, at least for me, it felt a little bit like I was jumping off the cliff. It can be different. Not all people will respond well to it, or will know how to help you. A lot of times you can feel on your own, and there are a lot of people out there on the internet and communities to connect with. But stick with it. Stick with the difficulty. And when you don't get the loan that you're approved for, other hurdles come up. There are people here to help you.
I think what Bill said, reaching out to somebody who's already living in a tiny house and kind of find somebody who's doing what you like, what you want to be doing, reach out to them and ask them, because almost certainly they got help before they moved into one. They're almost certainly going to help you. So reach out to somebody and talk to them. And then, I mean, again, reiterating what you said, don't be too turned on. It seems more risky than it is, I think. I mean, given the financing and the zoning and all this stuff. Again, I know lots of people. We know lots of people who live in tiny houses and never have any issues with the stuff. I mean, it's just it seems oh my goodness, I'm gonna be living in this gray area, and you are, but it's really just not as big of a deal as it might seem if you're just looking at it on paper. You know what I mean? Yeah. Once you get into the house, nobody cares. It's really not a big deal.
And I would say, to help you do that, the sort of model of thinking, okay, what's the worst case scenario? What's the worst that can happen? And if you're okay with that worst case scenario, then do it. Go for it. Yeah.
That is so awesome. And to add to that too, there's people that have lived in their RVs. There are people that live in RVs.
There are people who live outside. I mean,
exactly. Yeah.
All over the world, and they've been doing that a lot longer than tiny homes have been around too. So, you know, it's just a matter.
Yeah, it's not a big deal.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so great. Thank you guys so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
It's so fun to talk face to face, kind of. But if there's a chance, maybe we'll do it again in the future. But like I said, you guys are so fabulous. Once again, to anyone watching, this is Bela and Spencer from Boulder Creek, California. Yeah. And I guess if you want to stay in their tiny home, check it out on their blog, right? There's information
on Airbnb. I set up a link tree finally in my profile, so I've got a link to it. And if you have any questions about living in a tiny house or anything, please reach out to us. We've been there. We're happy.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much. And yes, give them a follow. And have a great weekend, you guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
All right. Now I just have to end. There we go. Bye.